Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in once again as we get closer and closer to the end of our course, although our due dates, which we'll look at right here, are pretty spread out because of a couple of things. First of all, really practically speaking, we have the Thanksgiving break, which is technically, I guess class-wise, would cover like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but as you're probably discovering, if you're in other classes, things do tend to wind down for that Monday, Tuesday as well. So our final due dates are kind of spread across that, but also, of course, your focus is the final essay. So there's not a lot of like other stuff to do, like we might have done in some of the earlier units where we could move from one smaller activity to another and do that sort of scaffolding thing. So we got to essay 1, and then we sort of turned right around into essay number 2, or the final essay. And so once we got the ball rolling with some initial brainstorming here in our last unit, our last due date, it didn't make sense to do something else really quickly right around the bend. So there's kind of a long gap here that gives you time to be working on your essay, thinking more about it. Certainly you can be in touch with me if you really feel like you're stumped for a topic. And then we get into a couple of different things that we'll do for Unit 10. And then, of course, in 11, you're submitting the final essay. So one of the things that you were doing then as part of Unit 9 would have been suggesting a tentative topic, which certainly was tentative. I mean, we were just getting the assignment, so you were just having the first opportunity to think about this. So you're certainly not locked into anything, but what I tried to do is provide some feedback or maybe ask some leading questions or something like that in the comments that I would send back with the grade to maybe answer questions that you had or make some suggestions. So you can always follow up with me by email if any of that is unclear, or if it's something you'd like to pursue but maybe you're not exactly sure what I was getting at, or if you're still stumped for ideas. The one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the grading for that discussion board, it wasn't really about the quality of your topic proposal per se, or how far along you were, since a lot of people were just still tossing around some ideas. So you may have got full credit for engaging in that process and responding to other students, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's like an A-OK for the topic you suggested. I mean, if you didn't suggest a topic, you may have just been, again, like in that really early brainstorming stage. So you get full credit for that, but it doesn't mean that you can sort of stay at that really murky early brainstorming stage for much longer. That's where you want to move the process along. And again, this sort of goes back to something we covered earlier as far as writing process goes. Like, what are the other steps you could be doing, even if you don't have a really solid, fully polished thesis statement. So clearly there's rereading the primary text, there's brainstorming you could do, there's free writing. You could certainly start the research part. Even if you have only one of 2 texts that you might want to compare, again, you can start doing some background reading for that one text. And in fact, in doing that, you may discover an idea or a reference to, or just some like connection to something else, that other second primary text that you need for your essay. So it's not like if you don't have a polished thesis statement, the whole process stalls out, because it really doesn't. You can still move things forward. So that's one note about the grading for the discussion board there, is it really was about your engagement with the brainstorming process rather than an evaluation of the topic you proposed exactly. So it's always good too to maybe remind us of the actual assignment, just so we're clear moving forward. So the reading assigned was Death of a Salesman. I think it's a good choice to write about, just because there's lots of research available. There's lots of themes and different kinds of characters, different kinds of character relationships. You're not going to end up repeating yourself from something you've already written for essay 1. So it lends itself really well. That's not to say, though, that you have to absolutely write on the play. You could choose a different work from our syllabus, or really from our textbook, which is, kind of custom for our course. So there's a limited number of things, and many of them have to do with the same kinds of themes. But ultimately, we're writing a comparison essay, so you're choosing, again, one from our book or syllabus. I recommend the play, but it doesn't absolutely have to be. And then we're taking this idea of literature really, really broadly. So you're taking that more formal piece from our textbook or syllabus, and then comparing it to almost anything like a sort of, I like artifacts from pop culture, but it could be another literary work, it could be another thing from our book or from our course. Again, being careful not to repeat yourself. So it could be like another play, it could be a movie, TV show, graphic novel, music. There's lots of room for creativity in there. It's important, though, that we understand that we're comparing two primary texts. And again, thinking in terms of like, do they cover a similar theme? Do they involve a similar kind of character relationship or dynamic or set of relationships, like a sort of family unit, for example, as in the play? And then we have our 3 secondary source requirement. Again, not general websites. We're using database material. It has to be direct discussion of the primary texts. And if you choose something creative like, let's say, a movie or a piece of music, you might find that or you might think it's going to be challenging to find database material, but if we remember, and I can show you really quickly again, just how broad our database coverage is, remember you might not find something in, like the literature section down here in the humanities area, but maybe something in one of the more general ones, even if it's something like a newspaper. So you find a movie review, for example, through one of these, like New York Times, for example. There's another one, this one, that collects a whole bunch of different newspapers. So what you might find is just a paragraph or two that is like a movie review, but it's still, for our purposes, counts as a source. It's from a credible source here, a database, and it is a direct discussion of whatever that primary text is. And remember, you don't have to have like a 30-page source and quote 100 different times from it. You may just pull a couple of sentences from the source, but that's all you need to do, right? So unless you wanted to, find 4 sources so that you have that balance, the sort of 2 and 2 for each of your primaries, you'll end up probably with the 2 for one of the sources, maybe the more kind of literary or available one, and then maybe 1 source for something that's a little bit off the beaten path. Again, I can help maybe direct you to certain databases or certain resources that could help with that. And that's where the library comes in really handy. They love to field questions like that and help with research. Okay. So then let's take another quick look at Unit 10. This is kind of repeating from the earlier video announcement. We have 2 things going on. Well, this whole setting up Blackboard Collaborate, I mentioned that before, and you can walk through it if you need to. We'll return to topics and sources. So this time we're again getting you to talk about what your topic is. It may have changed substantially from the Unit 9 discussion board. It may be kind of the same. Maybe it's just a little bit more refined. But now we want to talk about what secondary sources we've found. So again, we're sort of putting the pieces into place here as we move towards that final essay. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to conference individually. We can do this face-to-face. We can do it virtually. But it's important that you get in here and sign up for one of the times. If the times don't work for you, by all means, just let me know and we can work something else out. But please don't wait until like December 2nd and then claim there's no times available if you haven't even really checked or made the effort to get in touch with me before then. And this is a really beneficial opportunity, especially if you've got something substantial of your essay done, because we can look at it together, whether we're face-to-face or virtual. I can look at what you've written. If you have questions, I can address them directly. We can look at your works cited to make sure it looks good and all that kind of stuff. So it's really beneficial to sort of force yourself, if you think in terms of due dates. Not that the final is due when it's due down here, but if your conference date ends up being like Tuesday, December 1st, kind of aim for that to have a really, really good, substantial first draft of your essay done. That way you get some feedback from me and have lots of time to make a few last tweaks before you're submitting it, maybe even earlier than the deadline, and then you're done early, which is great. Okay, so one last little note here, and you'll see a picture that's already in the announcements area. So the final essay is run through a system in Blackboard called SafeAssign. It's sort of like a plagiarism checker. And I think I mentioned way at the start of our course that I never assume that students go into a course like planning to plagiarize or planning to cheat. I'm sure there's a very, very small percentage of that kind of thing that goes on, but in my experience, what more commonly happens when it does happen, and it's still pretty uncommon, but more often than not, plagiarism arises from having a kind of high stakes essay at the end like we've got here, so there's lots of points attached to it. We have lots of time, but if people don't manage that time effectively, then they get behind the 8 ball and it's sort of the last minute and they just either get sloppy or they just kind of make a bad choice. And so they plagiarize, and there's no such thing as unintentional plagiarism. I mean, we've covered like research stuff and what plagiarism is, so that's not an excuse. But anyway, here's a screenshot from a typical like safe assign output. So you'll notice, and this happened to be the very first sentence in an essay that I received a couple of semesters ago. So the machine itself, right, checks the text of all the essays against websites, other essays that have been submitted, all kinds of it's like the Google of plagiarism. And so you can see that what it found was the uploaded text, the student's essay that's got submitted, matched pretty much exactly what we could find at this website. So it took the machine I don't know, 0.6 seconds or whatever, and me even less to just see this and then check it out for myself. And so after all the work of going through the 8-week course, the student gets an F. I mean, that's the plagiarism policy. It's pretty clear. And again, I don't think the students set out to plagiarize or had these really evil intentions, but just maybe got backed into a corner and made a bad choice. So I want to really, really encourage people, obviously not to plagiarize, but really the more positive way of putting that is to manage your time effectively so you don't feel like you're panicked at the last minute and things just kind of happen that really shouldn't happen, all right? So I'm here to try to support you as you go through the final essay writing process. You can always email me or be in touch in other ways. We have at least one official conference time, but we could certainly do more if you want to, really feel confident in starting your essay or looking at a middle draft or a final draft or anything like that. So again, time management, and certainly take advantage of the resources that you have available, whether it's through the library, through the Learning Commons here, or of course through me. Okay, so I hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving break, and again, be in touch if you have any questions or concerns.